So, all right, you guys. So, hey, thank you for letting me know where you're from. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen again so you guys are able to follow along with my slides for tonight. So, as I was saying, I have a goal for tonight. I always have a goal. And that is the first thing is that I want you to walk away from tonight with the knowledge of how to make podcasting your side hustle. You know, I started out and podcasting was my side hustle, and now it's my full-time hustle. And I'm going to walk you through how to stand out as a podcaster in this saturated market, okay? Podcasting, it has grown exponentially since I started out in 2016, and it was around even before then for decades. So I'm going to walk you through how to stand out in 2022 and how to grow your downloads and how to grow your audience and how to attract press and sponsorship opportunities. Plus, I'm going to explain how you can join my Podcast Moguls Accelerator program. So a lot of you have heard of my program, or even if you haven't, you might want to know like how to get additional training and coaching from me. And this is the main way that I do it. So no pressure whatsoever. But of course, I would be remiss not to share with you guys how to continue to get more coaching from me after tonight's training. So let's go ahead and get into it, but please do stick around until the end, because that is when you'll be able to get into question and answers. I'll be answering all of your questions. So everybody who's here tonight, my teammate Joanna is compiling all of your questions. And then at the end, I'm going to go through every single one of them. Plus, I do have a code for you, a free Libsyn promo code, so that you can start your podcast and for the first month and a half not have to pay for hosting. So stick around for that as well. All right, so now, you guys, let's get focused. I'm actually going to take off my sweater because I am like this ring light, y'all. I'm just keeping it real with y'all. So everybody get comfortable, grab your water. I don't think I can click on the chat since my screen is shared. Oh, I can. All right. Hey, everybody. Oh, I love seeing where everyone's joining from. So get comfortable, grab your water, grab your pen and paper, screenshot if you want. Just tag me at Side Hustle Pro if you screenshot. I want to see who's in the building tonight and follow you back. All right, so now let's do a quick roll call. Let me know, is this you? Are you already a podcaster? Are you a side hustler with many ideas, but you haven't figured it out yet? Are you ready for a change? Are you a corporate America survivor in transition? Are you 5? All of the above. Drop the number in the chat. Let me see who's here. I'm seeing, okay, 4s, 1s, all of the above. All right, cool. I can totally relate. That's why I put these, because at some point in time, I was all of the above. And for those just joining, shout out to the replay viewers too. For those just joining, thank you. You are still here on time. We're about to jump right in. But first, I want to formally introduce myself, because I know some of you may have just seen an ad. You may not have listened to the Side Hustle Pro podcast before. So let's rewind for a second. I'm Nikayla. And in 2016, I launched a hit podcast called Side Hustle Pro. It is a podcast that profiles Black women entrepreneurs who scaled from side hustlers to full-time entrepreneurs. And since that time, I've amassed over 6 million downloads. We're closing in on 7 million soon. And I have amassed multiple six figures in sponsorships since that time. And that's why I'm able to do what I do. So while I started that podcast, I was side hustling. The podcast was my side hustle. And I worked full-time at NPR, where I led the digital marketing for top podcasts, some of your favorites like How I Built This, Code Switch, and more. And overall, I have over 15 years of experience as a marketer now. I actually had to update this slide today because I'm like, wait a minute, it's been how many years? It's actually been 15. So in 2017, I was able to quit my job to podcast full-time. And this is the message I posted on the Side Hustle Pro Facebook page when I did that. You can scroll back to December 2017 to listen to that episode where I shared what went into that decision, how I was able to now work for myself after starting a podcast a year and a half ago. And then just recently in 2022, Side Hustle Pro was inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame. And, being there at that ceremony, it just really, really cemented to me that I need to teach what I know. Like, I just need to continue teaching what I know, because I want to see more of us on these stages. I want to see more of us in the Hall of Fame. We have such amazing content, and, it's just a matter of pairing that content with the marketing and the strategy to grow your audience. So let's talk about it. But first, I got to give you a quick background also, because this I put in every one of my bios. Everybody needs to know that I'm born in Jamaica, grew up in the Bronx. And podcasting also gave me a lot of freedom and flexibility. So when I had that job at NPR, I had very few vacation days, but podcasting is what allowed me to quit my jobs and then go on the honeymoon of my dreams. So right here, I'm actually standing in Zanzibar, and we took this honeymoon 1.5 years after getting married, because at the time I just didn't have enough vacation days. And I don't know about you, but to me, having options to live your life on your terms means way more to me than money or anything else. And so that was always my goal, like to have that flexibility, because I wanted to work from anywhere. So my husband, Moya, and I are both certified side hustlers, juggling parenting, careers, and our many entrepreneurial passions. So flexibility is huge for us. We had a baby in 2020. So that flexibility gave me the opportunity to stay home with him for now 24 months and counting, and still earn an income. And again, when I was working, I had little to no family leave. I would not have had this same ability to do this. So I'm very, very grateful to podcasting for this. And again, want other people to have these options. So on the road to podcasting, I have done a lot of things right, but I've also done a whole lot of things wrong. And I think it's very important that I mention this, because some people, I know you're in this room and you think, well, oh, that podcast is successful because of this, or, well, that person has done that, and so that's why their podcast is working out. And I want you to know that, no, we all have to start at 0 downloads, and we all stumble along the way. So this was me in May 2015. I look pretty happy, right? Like, I have on my Mary Janes, my cap and gown. I'm sitting in front of my business school because I was graduating with my MBA. But what you can't tell is that inside I'm freaking out, because at this point I was rejected from my Google internship, which I thought would, result in me landing a full-time offer, but it did not. And so nothing else worked out, between then and graduation. And so I was graduating with no job, no money to, move back to DC with my boyfriend with no income whatsoever. And we're not even going to talk about the savings, okay? So when I got back to DC, I was lost. But I said, you know what, let me start going back to some of the things that that I enjoyed doing. My friends reminded me that I really enjoyed writing and social media. So I said, let me try out blogging again. I had abandoned it. I used to have a personal blog, and I had abandoned it when I went to school, but I said, let me start again. At this point, I knew I need to build my personal brand. Like, if I'm going to get a job in marketing, I need to show that I'm such a good marketer. I can market myself, right? So that was the mindset I had then. And I wasn't really sure what that entailed. So I did what a lot of you are doing tonight. I identified people who were further ahead of me in the process, and I started to follow them and consume their content, pay for their courses and things like that. And that inspired me to relaunch my blog. It was super tacky. That's why I got to spell out tacky, because it was just me, like, feeling around, throwing things together in the graphic design platforms. And I had content, but I didn't really have a purpose. And the important thing, though, and again, commend all of you in this room tonight and watching the replay, because I got started. You're getting started. You're taking the first step. And that's what I learned in that moment. I have to be willing to take the first step, even when you don't know where it will lead. And for those of you here who have already started your podcast, again, I commend you, because half of the battle is that analysis paralysis and not actually starting. So continue podcasting, right? Because I continue to blog. I continue just throwing stuff against the wall, trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about. And then after a while, I realized the common thread. I loved sharing the stories of Black women side hustlers and entrepreneurs. I just loved hearing how these badass women did what they did and were able to start their businesses, because deep down in the back of my mind, I wanted to be one of them, right? So that's when the idea for my podcast, Side Hustle Pro, was born. And this was the very first Side Hustle Pro logo. You'll see that it's now changed. So don't even worry about what your logo is right now, but that is how I started out. So a year before launching my podcast, Side Hustle Pro, I didn't even know what a podcast was. I had not listened to a podcast until someone told me about the read in summer 2015. So I was late to the ball game. And then a year later, for the first 7 days after launching Side Hustle Pro, I landed in the top charts. So not only was I an independent podcaster starting from scratch with no idea what I was doing, but I landed here on the left. I'm number 10 in marketing, and on the right, I'm number 37 in business. Like, what? So I went hard on promotion that summer. You guys, I got these t-shirts printed up. Every conference you saw me at, I was in my Side Hustle Pro t-shirt because I realized that if I took this seriously, I was onto something. And if I took this seriously, I could quit my job. If I took this seriously, I could monetize and quit my job. And I'm pointing at a sign in this picture that says, knowing what you already know will keep you where you already are. And that's what I just started to keep in mind. That became my mantra. So I started to study podcast monetization because I didn't know much about it. And that led me to investing in my very first big purchase as a side hustler. It was an $1,197 two-day event sponsorship intensive. So emphasis on events because these people had no frame of reference for podcasting, but that was the first thing that I saw in my area. I said, let me just go to this and start to learn how to talk to brand sponsors. So I did that. It wasn't podcast specific, but I was just so eager to learn. So taking the knowledge of how to engage with sponsors, taking that knowledge, I found that some of that was universal. 6 months after launching my podcast, pitched my very first sponsor cold. Cold meaning I didn't have a hookup at the company. I didn't know anybody there. I found an email through Googling. Matter of fact, it was like the info at, one of those like info@company.com. I emailed that email, and through the series of conversations that resulted from that, I earned my very first $4,000 podcast sponsorship contract. And, from that moment on, like the rest was history. So Side Hustle Pro has been featured on Apple. And again, I share this to show you guys where I've been, where I want you to go, what is possible as an independent podcaster. So Side Hustle Pro has been featured on Apple. 3 years after launching in 2019, I was featured on the Today Show as their passion to paycheck expert. I was also included in this compilation of 15 podcasts every woman should listen to by Oprah Magazine, and featured on Forbes as well. And one of my favorite things that happened in 2019 was also I hosted my first live show. So I don't know if many of you catch this, but the person I'm interviewing is Maya Elias, one of the people who I looked to when I was trying to figure out what a personal brand even was and how to grow my personal brand. So that really came full circle. So many of you who are here tonight, you never know what 3 years down the line will look like for, what you've learned from me and where our relationship will evolve. So let's talk about how I went from graduating with no job and no money, though, to appearing in major publications and on the Today Show. So let's jump now into my top 3 tips for podcasters. It's really hard to drill down all of your knowledge into 3 tips, but that is the time that we have tonight. So I'm going to share with you the top 3 things that if you're starting today, if you've already started, if you start doing these 3 things, you will see the most impact in the shortest amount of time. So here we go. Tip number 1, to stand out as a podcaster, you have to become known for one thing. Now, a lot of you guys are going to be looking at me sideways, like, what are you talking about? I'm great at this. I also do this well, and I just want to share everything I know. And okay, we'll break that one down a little bit more in a second. I'm just going to share the tips, and then I'll go one by one into each of them. So tip number 2 is going to be, you don't have to have a lot of followers to grow your show. You just need the right followers to gain your first 1,000 podcast downloads using Instagram and keep going from there. And we'll talk about what the right followers means. Tip number 3 is you don't need a ton of podcast downloads to attract TV, speaking, and sponsorship opportunities. You just need to know how to brand and pitch yourself. So, tip number 1. Let's get into it. So to stand out as a podcaster, you have to become known for one thing. So again, I know you guys are looking at me sideways because most people think that you need to keep your podcast super broad so you don't put yourself in a box, right? Like, let me know if any of y'all think that. Say box in the comments. Let me know if anybody else thinks like, I don't want to, be too narrow. I don't want to be known for just one thing. All right. And then most people also think that it's cool to make their podcast title. Okay, I see some boxes. So some people also think that it's cool to make their podcast title vague or coy or a play on words. I've been seeing a lot of that recently. And I'm like, oh my goodness, why are you making your life hard? Why are you making your life hard? So here's what happens when you think that and you proceed to, act in that way. You are actually making it hard for people to find your show. And you make it hard for people to know what you're an expert in. So then you miss out on being called on as an authority. You miss out on being paid as an authority on a specific topic because you're trying to keep your options so broad, you're not known for anything. So let's get into what you should do instead to stand out as a podcaster. And by the way, I made the same mistake. I'm going to show you exactly what I used to do as well. So I'm not preaching at you. I've actually done this and I now know why it wasn't working. So let me break it down for you. So here's what you should do instead to stand out as a podcaster. Number 1, you have to get clear on your interests. You have to really sit down with yourself and say, what is it that I want to talk about? What is it that I want to share with the world and why? Then you have to pick a niche, AKA your one thing. So even when you're getting clear on your interests, you're still going to be in broad territory, but you have to narrow down your one thing for the sake of this podcast, not saying you can't do anything else in life, okay? And then you're going to make it easy for people to find you and know what your one thing is. So like I said, I did this myself. I started out my blog. It was called Kayla K Speaks. As you've seen, what does that mean, right? If you see the words Kayla K Speaks, number 1, when it was all bundled together, people would often say it incorrectly because they couldn't read it. It was Kalia or Kayla Speaks. So that was terrible branding. And also it didn't stand for anything. I was talking about, brands one week. I was talking to side hustlers the next week. I was talking to people in tech the other week. People could not follow. But once I started to hone in and I picked my niche, the side hustling niche, that is when it became clear. So now when you see the word Side Hustle Pro, no, you may not know the exact angle of the show, but it's about side hustling. And if that is what you're looking for, you're going to find it, right? You're going to be able to see from the blurbs and the titles of the episodes, you're going to see that, oh, okay, there's a focus on Black women. There's an amplification of Black women stories. And from there, once I've grabbed you, you're more likely to listen, to read, to tune in, to watch all the different ways that you can consume Side Hustle Pro. So here's another example. So this is one of my Podcast Moguls alums, Erica McAfee. So when she joins Podcast Moguls, her show was the Erica M. McAfee podcast. And a lot of people do this. So a lot of people think, okay, I want to grow my personal brand, so I need to name the show after myself, right? Again, I did that, right? A spin on that. But that actually, again, no one, if they don't know your name, they don't know what you stand for, they don't know what your brand means. So she actually has a podcast about pregnancy, loss, and infertility. And so she specifically focuses on the stories of Black women. And so now that she has rebranded to Sisters in Loss, she has this vibrant podcast logo. She has the African print subtle in the backdrop. And of course, she can still include her name. Now she's being called on to speak on this topic as an expert because she's made it clear. And women who are looking for these stories about loss, sisters who have gone through loss, are able to find and connect with the stories they need to hear. So you're not just doing this to grow your brand, you truly are doing this to serve the people who need your podcast. Because once they find you, they're finding the solution to their problems. They're finding the comfort to their problems. They're finding the humor they need in their day. They're finding the entertainment, the information. You get what I mean? So this is why you want to make sure that people can find you. So I know some of you might be asking, like, how do you pick a niche? How do you become known for one thing? Well, you have to start with researching your prospective topic. So researching doesn't have to be anything deep, like you don't need to go into the history catalogs at a library or anything like that. Start with a Google search, both, on the Google browser, but then also start looking into the podcast apps. Like actually open up the Apple Podcast app or Spotify podcast and search the title, not the title, but the topic that you plan to talk about, motherhood, entrepreneurship, Black entrepreneurship, comedy. There's a recent member of Podcast Moguls who talks about, it just slipped my mind, but I have people who talk about everything, being 50 and over and starting your new life, having a new lease on life. Start searching those keywords and see what is coming up, and then identify what's missing. What are people not talking about when it comes to this topic? So there were lots of podcasts, and there still are lots of podcasts that exist and that are being started each and every day about side hustles. But the more I searched, I could not find one that was talking about the angle that I wanted to explore. I was like, where are the Black women side hustlers? I know we side hustle. Like, why am I not seeing this conversation? And I tried. I really wanted to, someone else to do this podcast, but I couldn't find it. And so I realized I needed to do it myself. And you're going to have that same experience when you start to research as well. So the other thing that you can do to stand out is to tell a story no one else can tell. And no matter what your topic is, you do this by infusing your story and your perspective into your episodes. So this is not a tall order. This is not a big task. It sounds more complex than it is. You don't have to, reinvent the wheel here. All you have to do is share your testimony, share your experience as it relates to the topic that you are podcasting about. People want to know who is hosting this show. And what made you want to talk about this topic? So that is how your podcast starts to take shape as its unique thing, and you start to have your personal brand connected to your podcast. So this is the number one way to build your personal brand. So start with your secret sauce, and guess what? Your secret sauce is sometimes disguised as your failure or your shortcomings or even your quirks. A lot of the things that we are ashamed of, you guys, they're actually our superpowers. They're things that I used to be ashamed of, like that story I just told you, the fact that I graduated with no job. I was ashamed for a long time about that. A lot of my classmates didn't know. That day I was smiling, taking pictures, acting like I had a job lined up for me after school, and I did not. And looking back, I don't know why I was so ashamed. Hindsight is always 2020, because now by sharing that experience, others are able to relate to me on a level I would never have expected. I didn't realize how many people have gone through similar, just, quarter life crises and moments in life where you just were lost and had to redefine what you want in life. So don't forget, you got to make it easy for people to find you. As you're doing this research, as you are, thinking through your secret sauce and thinking through, how you want to share your stories, make sure that as you write as you think of your podcast title, as you think of your episode descriptions, as you think of everything that's going to go in your podcast, you're making sure that those keywords you want to come up for. So things like, for me, Black women side hustlers, Black women entrepreneurship, make sure that you are building that into your podcast descriptions, your podcast website, your podcast title, your podcast tagline, if you don't want it to be the title, because I understand that not everyone, I'm not saying you need to name your show The Business Podcast, right? But you have to figure out a way to weave it in. If it's not going to be the title, itself, then it has to be other places within your podcast. So it starts with your podcast name, like I said, your podcast description, that blurb that you see when you tag into a podcast, and then your episode titles. Each and every time you release an episode, you have an opportunity to use that for more search engine optimization, meaning that when people search for that topic, you have the opportunity to compete, to come up higher in the search engine results each and every time if you are very smart with your episode titling. Let me just jump into the chat a little bit. All right, some folks are rethinking their titles. Naomi says this is good information. Good. I'm glad. And I'm going to, break down as much as I can. Again, it's only so much we can cover, but these top 3 tips, like I said, if you take these tips tonight and start to implement them, you will see the most impact in the shortest amount of time. So again, start thinking about what do you want to be known for? Even if you've already started your show, thinking about, how does this align with what do I want to be known for? And if it's not currently aligned with that, then you're going to have to change it. And don't be intimidated by that. I just showed you 2 examples, myself and Erica, how we had to, tweak and, change our positioning, rebrand a little bit, but it's so worth the effort. So let's recap. Here's how to stand out as a podcaster. Get clear on your interests. Pick a niche, AKA your one thing, and make it easy for people to find you and know what your one thing is, okay? All right, now let's recap. How do you become known for one thing? So you're going to research your prospective topic and identify what's missing. You're going to tell a story that no one else can tell. And you're going to start with your secret sauce. And one more time, make it easy for people to find you. I can't emphasize this enough. So now let's get into tip number 2. All right. If you guys are following along, say good stuff. Natasha says, how do you want people to feel after hearing your podcast? So we can talk more about that. All right. I see good stuff coming in. Cool. All right. So let's talk about tip number 2. So tip number 2 is my personal favorite tip because you guys, I see the most traction on my show when I do this. So, all right, again, get ready to screenshot, really make sure you're paying attention here because this one's going to go a little fast. All right. So tip number 2, you don't have to have a lot of followers to grow your show. You just need the right followers to gain your first 1,000 podcast downloads using Instagram and keep growing from there. So most people do think that you need a whole lot of followers on Instagram to promote anything. And, a lot of people think that your Instagram feed needs to be this perfectly color coordinated with filtered photos in the perfect sequence. And honestly, we all spend too much time thinking about the color matching of our Instagram feed. Like we spend way too much time on that and not enough time on what actually matters. So here's what happens when we do that. We don't even try to create content because we get stuck in, is that going to look cute? Is that going to match? Oh, I need to make that the 3rd post so that this sequence, stays intact. And when you're doing that, you miss out on opportunities to share with your audience. And then your audience is going to remain stagnant. And in the podcast world, we need our audience to keep growing. We need that audience to keep growing. And by the way, I'm talking about Instagram because of the fact that, despite what you may feel about it, it is still one of the most direct platforms for being able to market, being able to interact directly with your target audience and being able to direct them to a link. So you can take these instructions and adapt it for TikTok or Twitter, but I really love Instagram for this. So here's what you should do instead to grow your downloads. So number 1, focus on getting in front of the right followers. What do I mean by the right followers? So I mean the people who will be interested in your podcast. So those are the people that are going to click that link in your bio and grow your podcast downloads. And that's what we want. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to give you a little, short little case study. So I want you to meet one of my Podcast Moguls alums, Ashley of the Stacks and the City podcast. So Ashley, this is Ashley, and she fly. So Ashley used what I call the Side Hustle Pro OMG formula to gain her first 1,000 podcast downloads. So when she joined the program, she had under 1,000 downloads. She was trying to figure out what was going on. So I broke down OMG, and I break down OMG inside of Podcast Mogul. So I'll share it here tonight. So OMG, each of the letters stands for a step. So the O is step number 1, which means you're going to obsessively audit. So before you can do that, you need to have a sense of who your target listener is. You need to learn who that person is. So for me, I know who my target listener is. She has a name. I know her occupation. She's Janelle. She lives in Harlem. She's working at American Express. She has a shea butter business on the side. She's trying to figure out how to grow it, where she wants to go with it. So Ashley also did this exercise for her perfect listener and figured out that, this person follows the Black women in finance hashtag on Instagram. She figured out, where else that person is hanging out, because when you know who your person is and you know their habits, you know what they're consuming online, and then you're able to find them there. It's like knowing someone goes to a certain restaurant and being like, oh, funny bumping into you here. So obsessively auditing means to go to the accounts, the hashtags, the influencers that this person is following, and start to audit. AKA, take inventory of what kind of content does really well for this particular audience. It doesn't mean to copy, but it means to be more efficient with your time. So if you see that, graphics with a whole lot of text on it is not performing well, or if you see that, hey, this audience actually doesn't really like reels that much, they like static, high res photos with, a long caption underneath, or they like, multiple posts where you get to scroll through up to 10 pictures on Instagram. So start to audit that and say, what is this person, what kind of content resonates best with my listener? So Ashley went through that. And then you're going to do the M in OMG, which is to make friends. So a lot of people forget that social media networking is the same as in-person networking. At least I've always believed it is, so just like you wouldn't go to a networking event in person and just sit on the wall and expect to get anything out of it. You can't go onto social media and say, I'm going to start this podcast and I'm not going to follow anybody. Like, no one is going to know about your show unless you go out there and introduce yourself. So this is not follow for follow. This is literally saying, hey, I know that these people need my content. They don't know it exists. Let me introduce myself with a follow. What's going to happen when, again, you've identified your target listener is they will first and foremost be attracted by the title that just followed them. So when they see Side Hustle Pro just followed me, they're like, what's Side Hustle Pro? Oh, that's interesting. I'm a side hustler. And then they go on the page and they see all these dope Black women side hustlers. They're like, what is this? Let me find out more about this. So that's what you want to happen. You're following, AKA introducing yourself to your exact target listener who just hasn't heard about you yet, but you're about to put them on. And then the G in OMG is to go over that data, AKA when you start doing this formula, you need to start your podcast Instagram account. You need to make it a business account so that you can see insights, business or creator account, so you can see your insights. And you're going to be able to see the activity on your page that week, the content, which content performed the best, your audience, who, where they're based, what cities they're based in, what hours they're active. All right, I see you guys have raised hands. Go ahead and lower your hands and just put your question in the chat, please, because I'm going to answer all of your questions at the very end. All right, so please go ahead and lower your hand. I see your hand, and I'm going to get into all of these questions during Q&A at the end. So stick around to the end, you guys. All right, I hope you guys aren't seeing that on your screen. All right. So Melissa, please lower that hand. I'm teaching, so I can't figure it out. So anywho, here's what happens as a result, you guys, of what Ashley did, which is the OMG formula. She went from having 758 to 1,216 Instagram followers in less than 8 weeks in Podcast Moguls. And Stacks in the City went from 300 to 1,400 monthly downloads in less than 8 weeks. So there was a direct correlation between growing her audience, introducing more people to the Side Hustle Pro show, to the Stacks in the City show, and having those downloads grow. So That might not sound like a lot when you're looking at it, but that's actually a 4x jump, you guys. So imagine doing 4x numbers in less than 8 weeks, and then you're going to keep growing from there because you're going to continue doing OMG. So this is how I started to grow Side Hustle Pro, and this was really the game changer for me, because the more I put my show in front of people, the more people would click on that link in my bio to listen, the more they would be, the more they would see my content come in their feed. And then that is how my downloads and listenership grew. So why is getting in front of the right followers so important? Because as your followers grow, as I said, so does your downloads, but then also so does your email list when you are creating freebies for your followers to opt into. So you have so many opportunities here. Not only are you growing your email list, growing your downloads, but then you're also growing your email list through freebies, through having the call outs in your podcast, telling people to opt into your email list to hear more from you, and so forth. So the goal is brand awareness, okay? The goal is brand awareness and exposure. And that is why we do OMG. So again, as your downloads grow, so do your opportunities to position yourself as an expert, to land press, to monetize your show, and do so many things. Alrighty, so now let's look at Stacks in the City again. So Stacks in the City landed in the top business charts on Apple Podcasts after she started to implement OMG. And again, followers growing, downloads growing as a result, upward trajectory in the charts. And there are hundreds of thousands, actually millions of podcasts now. So for you to be in the top business charts, you have to be in the top 200 business podcasts in the entire, Apple Podcast business catalog. So this is a huge, huge accomplishment. And because of the Stacks in the City platform that Ashley built, she was able to expand her personal brand and her income generating opportunities beyond podcasting. So the number one thing that podcasting does for you, if in case you're still on the fence of if you should start it or not, the number one thing podcasting does for you is it helps you to build an audience. And as you build your audience, you're able to test and figure out, what kind of business you want to start, what kind of side hustle you want to start. Excuse me. For Ashley, she really loves real estate. So she started to host workshops. And as a result of the platform that she built with podcasting, more and more people wanted to know about how she does real estate, how she's able to find these homes and invest in them and, completely gut and renovate them. And so she was able to start a whole entire new revenue stream. So this is what's possible with growing your tribe, aka growing the right followers using Instagram. This is actually an example from myself when I started Side Hustle Pro. I got this comment from the Nakira show, and she said, "Listening in now. I don't know how you found me on IG, but thank God you did. My work days will be spent catching up on past podcasts." So essentially, this is what you want to do. You want your person to say, "I don't know how you found me, but I'm so glad you did." And, she commented a little later too and said, "Girl, I'm still on a high. I saved every episode to my phone and listened all weekend while riding in my car. It's so easy to complain when you have a 9-to-5 and want to pursue your passion full time. But I was telling one of my friends after listening to your podcast, I feel like, what am I complaining for? Your podcast was like a voice saying, keep going. Oh, and I made my friend subscribe as well. LOL. Thank you again." That's it right there, you guys. You find your person, and then that person also becomes an ambassador. So they start telling people to listen, and they start telling people to follow. And so again, just audience growth. That is the goal always. All righty. All right, so you guys are following along. Cool. So this is just some more screenshots. So let's recap really quickly. How do you gain the right followers on Instagram? So I hope you guys were following along. So the O in OMG is for obsessively auditing. The M is for making those new friends. And the G is for going over the data. If you follow along, let me know in the chat again with good stuff. And for those of you with questions about which Instagram to use, we'll get into that in like just a few minutes in Q&A. So quick check-in time. Let me know if this is helpful for you. You can type yes, you can type good stuff. I'm going to hop over to chat for a little bit. All right, I'm seeing the good stuff coming in. Cool beans, cool beans. All right, I love it. So now let's go ahead and get into tip number 3. Let me take a quick sip of my water first, you guys. Okay, so tip number 3 is you don't need a ton of podcast downloads to attract TV, speaking, and sponsorship opportunities. You just need to know how to brand and pitch yourself. So I know we just talked about the downloads, right? And the audience growth and the downloads growth, but don't let that stop you from starting to attract and make yourself attractive for TV, speaking, and sponsorship opportunities. So most people think that you need millions of downloads to be invited to speak at conferences or to be featured in publications. And here's what happens when you think that. You miss out on opportunities to add value to every room you are in. And then you miss out on opportunities to connect with people who need your point of view. The great thing about podcasting is that it gives you the mic right now. Literally, it gives you the opportunity to step on a stage right now and say, I am the expert in this. Here is my knowledge. Here's what I have to say. Like, there are no gatekeepers there. You don't need anyone's permission. So all the mental block you have around, I want to do this one day, start with your own show. Give yourself your own platform, right? And then you start building that portfolio. So here's what you should do to start getting features. So first of all, you start that podcast, but then you also need to start learning what the publication, the TV show, the conference you want to be featured in or speak at or invited to speak on is looking for. So you need to obsessively audit them too. You need to get your portfolio ready. You need to know your story. And then you need to start pitching yourself. And practice truly does make perfect with this. You get more confidence as you go. So again, you're going to research conferences where you would like to speak. Again, research meaning just Google the conferences in your industry for the topic that you want to start podcasting about. Evaluate. Once you've found these things, evaluate the topics and the themes that they've covered before, and then start to determine what you bring to the table. I like to develop a list of 3 potential topics and this is where your multi-passions can come into play, right? So you can speak about things beyond what you podcast about, but of course you're going to lead with the podcast topic. So for me, for example, I can talk about podcasting, I can talk about social media marketing, and I can also talk about side hustling, obviously. So all of that still falls under my podcast and what we're talking about. But, those are also 3 separate topics that I present depending on the conference or depending on the opportunity. So then what you need to do is, decide which one you're going to go forward with and outline the key takeaways you would provide the audience. You guys, everything you do once you start a podcast is about your audience. So when you're pitching, it's also about the audience. What are they going to get about this? What are they going to get from this? Excuse me. Then you're going to develop your portfolio and know your story. I keep saying that because, I even experience this when people come on the show and, I say, tell us about yourself, and they start rambling on for 2 minutes and I got to figure out how to interject and like cut them down. So you got to be able to succinctly sum up your main points of your story, okay? And clearly illustrate why you are the right person to speak to this topic. You're going to have to do this in a few bullet points. So here are some of your portfolio ingredients that you should start getting into place. Get a quick website up. So my current website is, a website that I did once I went full time with Side Hustle Pro. My very first website is still up, KaylaKSpeaks.com. That is what I mean by a straightforward website. I had that same template on sidehustlepro.co for the first 3 years of podcasting. It did the job. It had white space. It wasn't too crowded. You were able to find about me, contact, all that good stuff, episodes. So quick website. Write out your bio. Don't make your bio too long. I saw a 2-page bio of someone the other day and I was like, why, Lord? No, but seriously, sum up your bio. in a paragraph, because you want to think, when Oprah Magazine calls me, what blurb are they going to put? They're not going to put 2 pages. Okay. So sum that up in 5 to 10 sentences, and then get some headshots. Now, this is one thing I will always say you should invest in, because most times we're going to end up using our headshots for like 2-3 years. So invest in that. All right. And so once you have this in place, then start contacting organizers, because again, you've written out the key takeaways, you've written out your bio, you have your list of potential topics, and start to pitch. Start to pitch yourself. Practice makes perfect. And towards the end, when I tell you more about Podcast Moguls, I actually have a pay in full bonus where you'll be able to get my exact email pitch that I sent to the conference organizer for a conference in Barbados. I was flown out to speak, all expenses paid to this conference. Again, another cold email pitch, but I've gotten pretty good at them. And I pitched myself for this to speak on the topic of social media marketing. So stay tuned for that. So here are the pitch ingredients that I like to use. I highly recommend it. A quick 3-sentence intro: hello, name, title, description of what you do, 4-sentence overview of the session. I'm going to do this session, social media branding, where I talk people through X, Y, Z. Then you're going to share 5 bullet points with the key takeaways for the audience. Emphasis on the bullet points, because when you send an email, you want to break it up so that their eyes can skim and get the gist, because no one wants to read a long email from you. Okay. So emphasis on those bullet points. And then you're going to wrap it up with, more about me, and then your 6 to 7 sentence bio. All right. And I'll give you 10 if you really, really need it. But I think most of us can do a quick conference bio. Think of a conference booklet, and we could sum that up in 6 to 7 sentences. So again, I landed my first 4,000 in podcast sponsorships via cold email pitch that contained this recipe. And you can as well. And again, I will also include this. I also include this email as a pay in full bonus. So you can get that email again to see what I mean. And then pitch success by having my portfolio ready. So the producers for these 2 opportunities, to speak on TEDx and to speak on the Today Show, they reached out to me. They found me because, I did the things that I explained to you tonight. I made sure that I niched down. I became known for one thing, and then I made sure I come up in search results for that one thing. So they found me because they were looking for that one thing. And then I also had my portfolio ready. So I was ready to hand out my bio and my headshots when they came looking. So be ready, okay? Stay ready. So stick around to the end again, because I am providing you the opportunity to get my exact email pitches, okay? So let's recap though, before we get into Q&A, how to pitch yourself for opportunities. So number 1, research conferences where you'd like to speak. Number 2, evaluate the theme and the topics for that year. Number 3, determine what you bring to the table. Number 4, develop a list of 3 potential topics. Number 5, outline the key takeaways you would provide the audience. Number 6, develop your bio, clearly illustrating why you are the right person to speak to this topic. 7, contact those organizers. And 8, pitch. All right. So quick rewind: how to make podcasting your side hustle. Tip number 1, to stand out as a podcaster, you have to become known for one thing. Tip number 2, you don't have to have a lot of followers to grow your show. You just need the right followers to gain your first 1,000 podcast downloads using Instagram and keep growing from there. And tip number 3 is you don't need a ton of podcast downloads to attract TV, speaking, and sponsorship opportunities. You just need to know how to brand and how to pitch yourself. So let me jump over to the chat real quick. I'm seeing some of your comments. Love the ingredients. Good. I'm so glad. And someone said, I'm not about to read 2 pages. I agree. We have got to be able to sum up our qualifications, you guys. So let me know something. Do you want to know even more? So as you guys, well, you may not know, but I actually do coach aspiring podcasters and emerging podcasters. So I do this inside of my Podcast Moguls program. And all of you tonight for being here tonight and sticking with me, I want you to know that you are invited into the next cohort of Podcast Moguls. And I will be giving you a promotional rate tonight for coming to tonight's class. So again, we are going to get into Q&A, but if you'd like to know a little bit more about Podcast Moguls, all right, people are saying yes. Let me know if you'd like to hear a little bit more about it. Have I earned the right to tell you a little bit more about Podcast Moguls? All right, tell us. That just reminded me of, I don't know what show I was watching with my son the other day, but anywho, so inside of Podcast Moguls, I give you guys my entire playbook, okay, for podcasting. So Podcast Moguls is an accelerator program, and I teach you my proven effective marketing strategies for you guys who want to increase your downloads, who want to grow your podcast audience and monetize, okay, keyword monetize your podcast. So Podcast Moguls will teach you how to launch a top podcast and gain listeners on day one. It'll teach you how to triple your current downloads and make income from your show. And it has 3 parts to it. So part 1 is the course. I provide you with an 8-step podcast success curriculum, including video lessons, tutorials, templates, swipe files, and guides, so that you don't have to do the guesswork. Last night was one of our coaching calls. We have our coaching calls on Wednesdays. And, one of my Podcast Mogul students said, I was tired of Googling because Googling can only take you so far when she was talking about why she joined. And it's so true. A lot of people have the misconception like, oh, I could just Google this. Why should I pay for that? But Googling can only take you so far. It can get you started. Sure. Go out there, launch your show. But when we want to talk about, the steps and the ingredients you need to grow your show to a place where you can secure brand deals or where you can launch your own program to make income from your show, that's why we're doing moguls. Okay. We're trying to build moguls here, not just hobby podcasting. So if you're interested in that, let me just share a little bit about each of the modules. So module 0, because it's the fundamentals module, is where I go through everything. So I share suggested equipment at 3 different tiers. So low, medium, higher cost. I share with you the exact setup that you need to do and how to record, how to edit, and where to host your podcast, plus how to publish it so you actually end up on the Apple Podcast, Spotify, all these different apps. So for anyone who's intimidated by all that tech stuff, we go through that. So then module 1, we get into refining your topic and finding your perfect listener. So all of you guys who have questions tonight about that, this is the module where I will walk you through how to go from having all these ideas or having a broad idea to be able to narrow it down to that one thing. And then also identify who your target person is so that you can find them online. And then module 2 is positioning your podcast, AKA determining how you are going to brand and bring your podcast to market so that you come out the gate running with a hit podcast. So I share with you my HIT hit podcast formula. And then we get into module 3, which is the road to launch. I share with you all the steps leading up to launch that you need to do, a checklist, things that you need to check off to make sure that you are ready and all your, T's are crossed, I's are dotted. And then module 4, we start to get into the marketing, because this is how we grow our audience. We need to do marketing. So there are 3 layers of that. Module 4 is where I walk you through growing your Instagram reach. So we go through OMG again in more depth. Module 5 is when I go through email list growth. So email list growth is one of the key ways that you monetize, because with anything that you're selling, you need to be able to email people and let them know. And then module 6, we get into Facebook and Instagram advertising 101, because this is also one of my secrets to growth, is that even when I was just starting out, even if it was just $5, I put ad dollars behind my post to increase the reach even more and to expand my audience so that more people outside of my network were seeing my posts. And then module 7, we get into positioning your podcast for monetization, AKA what you need to have in place, what potential sponsors will be looking for, how to prepare your podcast pitch deck for when you go and pitch sponsors, how to know how much you can price your show for advertising. I walk you through all of that. And then module 8 is creating that winning pitch. So again, I walk you through how to put together a winning pitch deck that will secure sponsorship. So that's what we go through in Podcast Moguls in part 1, the course itself. You can jump in today into the course and you could binge it like a Netflix show, or you could take your time and go 1 week at a time. It's up to you. The course itself is on demand. And then there's also the community aspect. So we have this private community where, you're able to ask questions in between our coaching sessions. So I've shared, or just share your progress. So this is a screenshot of something that Felicia of the Trill MBA podcast, you'll see her number 53 here in like the middle row, middle section. You see the Black Power fist in purple. That is the Trill MBA show. Awesome show, by the way. And when she landed in number 53 in the Apple Podcast charts, she shared it with all of us because we root for each other. We support and encourage each other. So that is the beauty of the private community. And then part 3 of Podcast Moguls is the coaching. So we will meet monthly for video group coaching calls with me, where you get to ask me your questions. You bring your challenges. Again, like I said, it's every third Wednesday. So we just had it last night. And, we had a really great session where we were talking through just, challenges that people were coming across. And we even talked about some things with, different content that people were thinking through, and you'll receive that personal guidance from me. We'll do deep dives on topics as well. So this screenshot is from a session that we had where my editor, Chris Mann, came on and was able to answer even more in-depth questions about editing. So for anybody who has questions with that session is actually saved. So you can log in today if you purchase Podcast Moguls, and you'll actually be able to watch the replay of that. So that was a really great deep dive. But you don't have to listen to me, you guys. You don't have to take it from me. I want you guys to, if you're not gonna listen to me, listen to my Podcast Mogul students. So this is Shirley McAlpine of the She's Got Drive podcast. Shirley shared that, she'd only started implementing my marketing strategies like 3 months prior, and this is what happened. She had around 25,000 downloads when she joined. So again, people join at all different levels. Some people haven't started and they literally just come in with many ideas, and some people come in already having a show. You're both in the right place, no matter what level you're at. And she went from having 25,000 downloads. She says she's now at 46,000. By the way, this testimonial was a little while ago, so she's grown beyond that now. She says her strategy absolutely works. So again, you don't have to listen to me, but I just want to share with you what some of the Podcast Mogul students have to say. And then Fritz of the Coin Gamma podcast. So again, many podcast moguls use their podcast as a launching pad into other things they want to do. So, you might see that some of their shows, they have less episodes, or they're not as regular, but that's because the other opportunities have popped off so much that they're just focused on that. So Fritz talks about the fact that he was able to speak at over 5 conferences, and he was even flown in internationally to speak at conferences, and it all came because of the podcast. All right, that's the power of podcasting right there. And the ladies of the She Too STEM podcast talked about, they said, because of Podcast Moguls, we had the confidence to host our first event. We started purchasing ads and have grown our social media tremendously. Another amazing podcast. And Felicia Dunn of the Hollywood Finesse podcast says, Podcast Moguls was the best investment I could make, not in Nikayla, but in myself. All right, y'all. I love that Felicia says that, because that's how I feel about when I make an investment in my business too. It's not in the person, it's in myself. She says, Nikayla is so hands-on. She's always ready to answer questions, and she's someone who knows exactly what she's talking about. This is what I pride myself on, you guys. And it's actually why, you have not seen me do like back to back launches of Podcast Moguls, because I pride myself on being able to provide that hands-on attention. And, I can only do that at the scale where I am truly taking my time and going through each cohort. And then just a couple more, because it was hard for me to actually choose which testimonials to share, but I just want to let you, see also what Sarah Morgan of the Leading in Color podcast had to say. She says, Podcast Moguls was such an amazing and necessary experience for me. The courses and worksheets from Nikayla helped me figure out the vision and purpose of my show. So I know a lot of you can probably relate to that, because you might have the idea, you may have already even started. And when you start, sometimes you think you know what the vision is, you think you know what the goal is, but as you're growing, sometimes 12 episodes in, you're like, I ran out of stuff to talk about, or I don't know where this is going. So I'm here to help you, map that out and to think through the overall vision, because when you're starting a podcast, this is something that you should want to do long-term, at least a year, but continue on. So you want to make sure you have a vision that allows you to keep creating content over and over again. And then finally, KK Smith of the Mom Stuff Coffee Shop podcast says, with Podcast Moguls, not only does Nikayla take the idea out of your head and put it into the world, but she helps you navigate your unique voice. That's it right there, you guys. We all have a unique voice, and we all have something important and valuable to say. And again, it's one of the things I pride myself on, in helping you to take that out of your head and to navigate how to put your unique voice into a podcast. So inside of Podcast Moguls, you are getting my monthly live coaching sessions. That in and of itself is a $4,000 value. If you were to get, everyone with Podcast Moguls, you're getting 4 coaching sessions. Now, secret, not so secret, when you join Podcast Moguls, you can always come to a live coaching session. Technically, your enrollment pays for 4, but there are people who have joined in 2018 who are still coming back. And I love that. Like, I love to see you guys. So, but technically, if you were to pay for 4 live coaching sessions with myself, that's a $4,000 value. You get lifetime community access to our community. I know creators who charge upwards of $197 a month for their communities. And, that would be a $2,364 value, but within your Podcast Moguls one-time enrollment fee, well, if you're paying full, or your 2 payment plan enrollment fee, you're getting lifetime community access. You don't have to pay again. And you're also getting all of my sponsorship pitch letters and my media kits, with in and of itself is an $1,197 value. I paid that for a 2-day sponsorship intensive. You're also getting my guest pitch templates. So exactly what I send out to guests that have the exact emails that I sent out to guests that have landed me, some of the awesome guests that you've seen on the show. Plus, when you invest, you'll also get Master the Gram, which is my focused Instagram course. By itself is $297, but it's included within your Podcast Moguls enrollment. So again, you're getting monthly live coaching sessions from me. You're getting lifetime community access. You're getting all of my sponsorship pitch letters and my meetings, plus my guest pitch templates, those emails that land you those guests, plus the Master the Gram course. And by the way, every time I update these courses, this is included. So version 2.0, 3.0, as things change on these platforms and I update things, this is included. It's a one-time fee. You do not have to pay again. Plus, when you invest, you'll get the Goal Getter Action Plan, which is my productivity, my short productivity course, where I walk you through my process that I use as a side hustler to be able to manage, the production schedule of making this podcast while also working full time. And I include this because I want you guys to win. And I know it's crazy out there. So you really need to develop a process and a system. So this is included in your Podcast Moguls fee. So you're getting monthly live coaching sessions. You're getting lifetime community access. You're getting all of my sponsorship pitch letters and my media kits. You're getting my guest pitch templates, plus Master the Gram, plus the Goal Getter Action Plan course. And if you haven't pulled out your calculator, this is actually a total value of $8,553. Obviously, I'm not going to charge that for this, but just, I'm not going to understate what this program entails and everything that I cover, and I'm happy to provide. But your investment is just a one payment of $997, which is the best value because that comes with pay in full bonuses. Or you can also do 2 monthly payments of $550. So you would pay $550 tonight, and then in 30 days be charged another $550. So the doors are now officially open, you guys. Come on in. Welcome, welcome to Podcast Moguls. Go over to sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. Let's drop that over in the chat. Let me see if I can pin that for you guys. And while I'm doing that, let me just say that I understand that when it comes to making decisions like this, I do understand that you really have to weigh in your mind. I'm never here to tell anyone what they should do with their money. I'm just sharing this example of how I make decisions. So when I was getting ready to make that investment, that the largest investment I made in myself at the time, I did this, would it be worth it if calculation? So, I said, would it be worth it to pay this if it could help me make this money back in a sponsorship? So I paid that one-time fee, and it almost 5x'd the amount I paid in a short period of time. Similarly, would it be worth it to you if Podcast Moguls helped you elevate your brand, which then would land you brand partnerships or land you the opportunity to, start a successful Patreon or to start a successful subscription on any platform? Like, thinking through what you want to use the program for and would it be worth it for that is how you can think about this decision. So would getting approached with media opportunities be worth it to you? If yes, then come on over to sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. Here's what happened as a result of me elevating my personal brand with podcasting. I was on the Today Show, and again, they found me because I did what I explained to you to do in tonight's call, which is to be known for one thing. Make sure you can be found for that one thing. So this is the link to join you guys. It's sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. All right. Let me go ahead and again, we're going to jump into these Q&As in a bit. Okay. So this is also what happened to Tolu of the UI Narrative podcast. So she actually started the program with just an idea. So for those of you, again, who just have an idea, haven't started your show, you can come into Podcast Moguls at that level. And now her podcast, UI Narrative, is actually sponsored by Google. Like, how amazing, awesome is that? So ask yourself, would that be worth it to you? Would it also be worth it to you if Podcast Moguls helps you land features in magazines? So that would increase your downloads. That would increase your reach. Would increasing your downloads and reach be worth it to you? Let me know. Come on over to sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. And again, inside of our Q&A, I'm happy to answer any questions at all that you have. I just want to share a little bit more with you about, what people have been able to do inside of Podcast Moguls. So this is Shayla of the Black Girls Wine podcast. She was here, on the left featured in Black Enterprise, and on the right in the Richmond Times Dispatch. Very, very cool. Love what she's building with her podcast. And I just love seeing Podcast Mogul students thrive, So the key thing, though, is that you have to be willing to take that first step at some point. So if that's you tonight, then, just know that the only way in and the only way out is through action. Let me get into these pay in full bonuses now. Okay. So pay in full bonus. If you pay in full, you will receive, number one, my pitch email that landed me my first $4,000 in sponsorship. So the exact thing that I sent out to the info@ email address that landed me that. You'll also receive my 5-day branding blitz. So these are the exact steps that I took coming out the gate that landed my show in the top 10 in marketing and the top 40 in business. Plus, you'll also receive my pitch email to Apple Podcasts that landed me in the new and noteworthy section with this episode of my show. which featured Curlbox founder Miley Teal. And then finally, you'll also receive my pitch email that landed me my very first international speaking engagement in Barbados. Not only did I speak there, but I was flown out to speak there. Okay. So that was a really, really awesome experience. And I'm sharing all of this with those of you, paying full bonus. So you can experience that too. So the power of podcast moguls. Before we get, just one last thing, y'all. I mean, the power of podcast moguls. I'm so proud of my podcast mogul students. So Alicia Franklin, Dr. Alicia Franklin, she now has her PhD. She posted this inside of our group when she initially launched. She actually shared her actual screenshot of her downloads. And she talked about going from her hundreds when she had just launched by herself, was doing Google University like a lot of people. And she says, I'm sharing my growth chart to show the power of this program. I started podcasting in November. I had no clue what in the world I was doing, nor how to market the episodes. I just thought the people were going to show up. How many of y'all think that they're just going to show up? She said, I obsessed over the course and I relaunched the podcast within a month of joining the program with so much more vision, thanks to Nikayla. I went from hundreds of downloads to thousands. Thank you, Nikayla Matthews, a Coleman. Thank you so much. And then this is Nia of the Black Wall Street podcast. She said that, nearly 2 weeks after launching her podcast, Black Wall Street 1921, which is now Dreams of Black Wall Street, she passed 100,000 downloads. So this is also a testament to what happens when you get super clear and super niche. And so within, in just 4 months, so she posted this in 2 weeks after she hit the 100,000 downloads mark, but she did that in just 4 months. And so her podcast prompted the BBC News to reach out to her and interview her and produce a 4-minute short video with her narrating the story of the Tulsa Race Massacre. How awesome is that? And Nia actually came into Podcast Moguls with a completely different podcast. And, after speaking and talking through some of the missteps, some of the things we talked about today, not getting clear, not aligning with what she wanted to be known for. She actually scrapped that podcast, and that led her to this new idea. This was her second podcast. So don't be afraid to restart, okay? And then finally, this is Blunt Blowing Mama, which I know some of y'all would love this name. So the Blunt Blowing Mama podcast is also a podcast moguls, and she posted this unprompted in her IG story. I just took a screenshot, and she said, Side Hustle Pro is an amazing podcast coach. As someone who is one of her podcast mogul students, I can truly say she helped me get Blunt Blowing Mama podcast off the ground. Grow BBM's IG page. I only had 3K followers when I started her program, and through her techniques, I've grown organically to over 21,000 engaged followers. She says, because of Podcast Moguls, I was able to find my tribe, and she even gave me helpful advice when I started BBM clothing line too. She really knows her stuff, and if you want to really build a successful podcast, then her Podcast Mogul program is worth the investment. So, again, if you don't want to take it from me, take it from my students. And like she said, I'm here with advice when you start to branch off outside of podcasting as well in the different monetization arms. I'm always here to be an ear and to offer my guidance. So again, you can join over at sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. If it's not already in the chat, I'll drop that in the chat in a second. Option 1 is a payment of $9.97. That's pay in full, and you will receive a bonus for that. Option 2 is 2 payments of $5.50. And I'll put up on the screen the pay in full bonuses one more time in a second. All right. So this promotional price does go away next Friday, April 29th at noon. And remember that when you pay in full, you qualify for the pay in full bonuses. All right. Join at sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. Stop imagining what you can do. Let's do this, you guys. Come on over. Just a recap of what you're getting though. Monthly live coaching sessions, lifetime community access, all of my sponsorship pitch letters and my media kit, my guest pitch templates, plus Master the Gram, plus the Goal Getter Action Plan. All right. So thanks for staying on to the end, you guys. Stick around. We're about to jump into Q&A. I promised you this code. If you join Libsyn.com right now to host your podcast, you can use code Hustle Pro. All right. You'll get the rest of this month and all next month free on Libsyn. All right. So we're about to jump into Q&A. I will leave this up on the screen. Let me see if I can leave this up on the screen. I was just looking at my phone to see if I can look at the questions this way so you guys can get this on the screen. Yeah, I think I'll be able to do that. All right. So let's jump right in. Oh, and thank you for posting that, you guys. The link is there. The link is now there in the chat. Joanna posted that. Again, sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. All right. So now let's get into Q&A, and let me know when you join, you guys, so I can shout you out. Okay. And Joanna, please let me know when people join. I'll shout them out. All right. So I'm going to go into the Q&A right now. Okay. Cool beans. Cool beans. Okay. So first question from Diane, how to protect your content through copyright. So, I would suggest reaching out to an attorney. I work with the wonderful women at the Creative Genius Agency, legal agency. So you can check them out because they work with a lot of creatives. So you can get all the information on that through them. I'm not an attorney. I'm not qualified to give legal advice, but that would be my first start. Marsha says, where do you go again for the data results? So it's best. Okay. So first question, Marsha, for results, when you have an Instagram account, you will turn that into a business or creator account. And when you're on Instagram, you just go over to your Insights tab, okay? And then you're able to see, let me see the best way to instruct you to that. So, when you click on your profile, you can go through it that way, or you'll have a professional dashboard, which will show you your account insights. And then you'll be able to see the accounts that you reach. You'll be able to see how people engage with your content, who's following you, and the like. All right. Mark, and Marsha also wanted to know, so it's best to talk about one topic and not multiple. Yes, it's okay. So if you want to talk about multiple topics, so what I'm talking about when I say being known for one thing, it means that you need to have an overarching topic. So it doesn't mean that you can never have a podcast that touches on different things, but there needs to be an overarching umbrella that weaves these topics together. Otherwise, when people want to share your show, they're not going to be able to say, oh, you should listen to this show. They talk about XYZ, or there's this great show about X, right? Like, think about anytime you recommend a show to somebody, the way you recommend it, you give them a quick summary, right? Make sure people can give your show a quick summary. And then finally, you asked, what site can we use for when people want to ask me questions? So are you talking about like doing like a AMA style thing? Let me know what you mean. So there are several sites that you can use. It depends on what you're trying to do. You can have people submit questions in advance on your website through a contact form, a type form, typeform.com, or just a Google form. Google Forms are free. So let me know what you mean by that. Mark wants to know, how much time daily does it take daily on social media if your podcast is in a place that is a niche market that's getting saturated to cut through? So when it comes to social media, I actually like to schedule a lot of content. And when I was starting out, I would spend, so I would batch schedule my days, which I talk about in the Goal Getter Action Plan course, right? Because this was my process. I didn't have a lot of time. So I had a dedicated day for each thing. So Mondays and Tuesdays were recording, Wednesdays were editing, Thursdays were for social media. And on Thursdays, I would devote an hour, maybe before work or maybe after work, to planning out content. And I'm not saying that I would get the whole month done. Like, that's unrealistic. A lot of people encourage you to batch schedule a month out. I don't think that's necessary. I think a week out is great. If you can do 2 weeks, cool. And I was never the person that's posted daily, multiple times a day. I think if you can schedule out a post a day, that is, because if you do that consistently, that's better than doing it inconsistent for, multiple days. So hour a day, write out, a few posts, And then during the actual day, set an alarm on your phone. Give yourself, 10 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the mid-afternoon if you have it, and maybe 30 minutes at night to go in there and engage and do OMG and things like that. But do not stress your life out over social media. Work smarter, not harder. And as far as the niche market, if you can share with me a little bit more about the niche market, maybe I can throw out some ideas off the top of my head. But no matter how saturated a market is becoming, it's really about finding your target listener more than anything else. Like, if you are going out there and putting your content in front of the people that need it, that matters way more than what's going on in the industry. Okay. All right. Charlia says, was it hard to find a topic when you can talk about anything? How can you market yourself? So no, it was not hard to find a topic once I started doing. So when you start doing, AKA starting to explore some of your interests, that is when you will start to see like, hey, I actually don't really like talking about this, or hey, I get bored of this. And that's when you start to see what you're gravitating to, what you enjoy doing more. So no, it's actually not as hard as people think. I think a lot of people spend time in their head thinking, oh, I like to talk about this, this, and that, but they don't actually start, because when you start talking about this, and that, you will start to see the patterns within yourself. Like, hey, I'm not enjoying this, I'm enjoying that. And then how can you market yourself? So that's such a broad question, Charlia. I'm sorry. Can you share a little bit more about what you're trying to market? So you are not marketing yourself. When it comes to podcasting, you are connecting with someone who needs your content. So the first part of growth for your show comes with understanding who your listener is and then growing that listener base. And that's how your show grows. So we have to switch the mentality of thinking about how do I market myself, and understand that once we have a solution that someone needs, again, a solution can be something that comforts them, something that educates them, something that entertains, something that educates. It doesn't have to be one thing, but what you're looking for is to provide a solution to an audience, grow that audience base, and that is how your show grows. And by your show growing, so does your own personal brand. But you can't start out saying, how do I market myself? Because no one's out there like, oh, I want to listen to a Nicaila Matthews-Okome show. Like, no one's out there like, I want to grow Nicaila's brand. They're like, oh no, I want to listen to this content Nicaila made. Oh, this content is great. That is the mindset you have to have. Rhonda wants to know, what are downloads? So Rhonda, whenever you have a podcast, whenever someone listens to your podcast, that counts as a download. And when you get sponsorships, brands look at how many downloads you have. So a download, it's how people engage with podcast content. So they look at how many downloads you have to get a sense of how big your show is, how big your audience is. Nicole says, great investment in program. How often do you open registration? So, that changes year to year. Honestly, last year I had 4 opens, and this year I might do a little bit more, but I can't give you an exact number right now, because that really changes with, again, I really try to give my attention and devotion to each student. And so I don't just open it like weekly or anything like that. Anna says, when does registration close? Registration closes on April 29th, okay, at noon Eastern time. Mashiria says, how often should we be podcasting? So I think you're asking how often you should release your podcast. So this is also going to depend on your audience, and also your bandwidth. So you first of all should be realistic with yourself about how often can I make this content. Don't set yourself up by saying, oh, I'm going to release twice a week or 3 times a week, when you know that you don't have the bandwidth for that. Start with bi-weekly if you need to. Start with, twice a month, every other week if you need to. Then, if you have the bandwidth, try weekly. Because the more you release, the more downloads you will see. Yes, but it's about more than that. It's about consistency overall. And it's also about communicating the expectations to your audience. So your audience needs to know, hey, this is going to be seasonal. She takes off every June and July, and then a new season starts in August. As long as you communicate that to your audience, then that's fine. And, you can release older episodes as reruns while you're on, break between seasons, but just tell your audience what's going on and they'll be fine. Evoya says, I'd like to start a podcast on kidney disease and how it affects the African-American community. I think that's an awesome idea. I think you should do that. I mean, I think that what I like about that idea is it's very specific. And so when people are searching for information on African-American kidney disease, it's guaranteed that, your show is going to be one of the ones to come up, because that's such a specific, but it's an important topic, and you're not going to run out of stories to tell. If it was a podcast where you're interviewing different people, like, everyone's experience is going to be different. And when it comes to disease, I don't think anyone tires of hearing stories, because you just want to keep on hopefully connecting with a story that you resonate with. So go for it. And if there's any way I can help, if you'd like my coaching, I absolutely, recommend and invite you to join Podcast Moguls. Savine says, I want to talk about tax advisory for small businesses. What would be the best platform to start my podcast? So by platform, I assume you're talking about maybe your podcast host. So when you start a podcast, after you record and edit the podcast, you upload it to what's called a host. Your host is what actually holds the files. And then it creates what's called an RSS feed. Think of that, it's a URL that has all of the data from the episodes that you've uploaded. So now that you've put your show on a podcast host, Libsyn is what would be considered a host. Anchor is another one of them. Buzzsprout, Podbean, Blueberry. These are other podcast hosts as well. When you upload your episode, the data goes to the RSS feed, aka the URL. And then when you go on Apple and you go on Spotify and you go on all these other places where you listen to podcasts, all you do is you upload, you copy and paste your RSS feed into your account there. And so now every time you drop an episode, everyone has your RSS feed, and then your episode, when it goes live, it is pushed out to all these distribution platforms, aka your Apple Podcasts, your Spotify, everywhere where people listen. Okay. You're able to, in your host, select everywhere that you want your show to go, and then it goes there. So I think that's what you're referring to. And I hope that helps to clarify what a host is for anyone who doesn't understand. I know that this podcast lingo and jargon can get confusing sometimes, and I'm here to demystify it for you guys. I walk you through all of that inside of Podcast Moguls as well. So you can have it on demand and see it as many times as you need to. Anna says, my two questions were, number one, what if you already have a business Instagram, but it's not your podcast Instagram? Can you use that business page to convert your audience to your podcast? Let me start with that first. If you're starting a podcast that you want to promote, you should have a podcast Instagram account. So you need to be able to point people to your podcast Instagram when you refer to it. So let's say your business is, Anna's tax service, and then you start a podcast called Demystifying Taxes. So every time you promote your show and you say Demystifying Taxes, that's what people are looking for on Instagram. So I highly recommend starting an independent business Instagram. Now, you may see people who don't do this, okay? There are always exceptions to the rule. It doesn't make it a good idea. All that does is make it harder for these people. And it works if you have a really large following, okay? If you have 200,000 to 1 million followers and you start a podcast and you just don't feel like having a podcast specific Instagram account and your following is so large, you can kind of get away with that. But if you do not have a large business account like that, then I highly recommend creating a separate podcast Instagram. Anna, you also asked, do you recommend creating a separate page specifically for your podcast? Yes. And question number 2, I'm starting an interview podcast, but would like to also share my story and perspective. Any advice on how to infuse the two? Yes. Take a listen to Side Hustle Pro. You'll see a mix of both. When I started out, I thought I would do every other episode, like an interview and then a solo, but it now averages more like once a month, a solo, where I give updates on my side hustle process. So that's how you infuse it. You just, whenever you want to do a solo episode, you do a solo episode. It's your show. You set the rules. Alrighty. Dr. Renee wants to know, how much money do we have to initially invest into starting a podcast realistically if we are on a budget? So realistically, you can start a podcast at, you need to have a microphone. Your microphone can range from $25 to $35 all the way up to 100 to 200. I'm not talking about like the super professional equipment. I'm talking about what most indie podcasters use. And then depending on where you record, so you can use free software to record. If you're going to be doing interviews, you might want to pay for a video platform service, meeting service, such as a Zoom or like a Riverside.fm, or Zencaster, which can run between 14 to 20 a month. And so, that's one of your monthly recurring costs. And then finally, hosting your podcast. It can start out free, like with this. That's why I want you to test it out free first with the Libsyn code. Again, that's Hustle Pro. And from there, hosting your podcast averages around 15 to 20 a month. So let's say around 40 a month is realistic. If you're looking to be a professional podcaster, the minimum that you'd be spending, and then startup costs would be, roughly 100. Aaliyah wants to know, do we need a show to start a podcast? Aaliyah, what do you mean by that? Do you need a show? Are you talking about a video show? Okay, you also said, where do I upload podcasts, and is it a free to do this? Okay, so I just addressed the cost, and then where you upload podcasts, I also addressed it on a podcast host like a Libsyn. Again, that's libsyn.com, and the code for that is Hustle Pro. I'll put that in the chat. And you're so welcome, you guys. I'm happy to answer all of your questions. Let me know if I've missed anybody's question. I think that we're rounding up towards the end. So if you, okay, we have a few more coming in already. A voice says, thank you, I'm going to reach out and join. All right, I'm so happy you're going to reach out and join. I'm going to post paid in full. Welcome, JP, welcome, JP Hawkins. All right, guys, you're going to get the bonus email after this call. All right, so let me paste the link to join again in case you missed it. Now, I used to do this on Webinar Jam, so I'm trying to figure out how to pin a comment on Zoom. If you know, let me know, But yeah, let's see. What does it say? All right, Elena Royston, I've seen your hand raised, and unfortunately, I am not, you know what? I'm going to do gallery. Let me see. No, I can't do that. Yeah, so go ahead and drop your comment. Okay, I see some questions in the Q&A. All right. So let me go into the Q&A. Marsha says, my site is for Black doctors and medical professionals. Is that still niche enough? Well, that sounds pretty broad. So by niche, what exactly what kind of content do you want to provide Black doctors and medical professionals? There's a wide range of things you could be doing. So yes, I think that you do need to get more clear on what you're talking about. And maybe you just didn't state it here. melaninrx.com. What do you talk about, and what would your podcast be about? All right, let me see. Okay. Deetra says, so the title of each episode should be more specific. Mine are a little kitschy, but my show notes are very specific with keywords. I would recommend making your episode titles more specific. You're going to come up on more Google searches. With that, you'll even come up in the Apple Podcasts and Spotify searches more easily. So search engine optimization applies with podcasts. So someone might be searching for a hot news topic, right? Like, someone just talked about melanin RX and that's their topic. Now, a hot news topic might pop up about Black medical professionals. And let's say you did a podcast episode on it. When people search for that news topic, how advantageous would it be for you if you happen to title your episode and include that topic in the episode rather than naming it something coy, So that's why we do that. That helps you to be discovered when it's time for the Today Show or Good Morning America to pull on an expert in that topic. Jada says, so can you not have a podcast on broad general topics? Must it be specific or focus-based? You can have a podcast on broad general topics. It's just much harder to establish a name for yourself with that. So if you do that, you have to be really strategic in that you need to come up with an umbrella theme. So some of my favorite podcasts and a lot of conversational based, friends podcasts have that broad general topic. And the ones that do really well, they kind of take on an angle. It can be based on the host personality, like The Read, for example. They really capitalize on that phrase, read, like reading people. And that they're going to go through a slew of pop culture topics. So, it's broad, it's general in terms of they're going to be different topics, but it's still under an umbrella because first of all, they have the same segments every single episode. And they're going to their personalities and the lens through which they're going to assess the foolery of pop culture. So that is how you do broader general topics. You have to it might seem like it's just broad, but it's actually very strategic, you guys. So that's what I'm trying to explain to you. All righty. Tracy G says, is the data you're tracking only from Instagram, referring to the G in OMG? So when I was giving the Instagram example, I was referring to Instagram data, but you could absolutely track Google, and you should look at your Google Analytics. You look at data across each platform to inform what you do on that platform. Yolanda Williams says, what are the basic equipment needed to start podcasts? So touched on that, but your laptop, your microphone, and the recording and editing software you're going to use would be how the general things you need to get started. Aaliyah wants to know, can you do podcasts with only voice? What do you think about that? Absolutely. So I know a lot of people are doing video podcasts, but guys, I just started my video podcast in 2021. That's 5 years after I started my podcast. Don't feel the pressure to do video just yet, okay? Podcasts are still booming as an audio only format. Do not get it twisted. Don't start to feel like everyone's doing video, all right? Natasha says, I missed the Listing Pro. I think that's the name and code for 1 month free. I missed that. Oh, okay. I just put that in the chat. So go ahead and scroll up. It's libsyn, libsyn.com, code HustlePro for the first month and a half free. Aaliyah says, where do I go to up? Oh, okay. Got that one. Got that. My podcast is released. Shay Jones, my podcast is released weekly every Wednesday. All right, let me just tap off the ones that I've answered. Fee says, would you suggest following a certain number of your target audience on Instagram per day? And how would you suggest interacting with them? So yes, I do go through that in detail a little bit more. So when it's time to start growing your audience, I think setting a goal per day, and if you have the bandwidth per hour, is a good thing to do. It's definitely what I did starting out, with a cap, because you don't want Instagram to think you're a bot and freeze your account. But setting a certain number per day is a good way to keep track analytically on your progress. Like, okay, I follow this many, I introduced myself to this many, this is how many, this is the conversion rate, how many people followed me back. And then you're going to have weeks where you're just going out and evening out the numbers a little bit. So you're seeing people who have not reciprocated, and you're unfollowing to clear up room to introduce yourself to more of your target audience. Marsha says, great session. When does the course start? How often will I meet with you one-on-one? I really want one-on-one coaching on podcasting. I haven't started, but I have done some live Zoom and Facebook Live. So the course is on demand. So you can literally join tonight. And like I said, binge it like Netflix. We meet for live coaching every third Wednesday of each month at 8 p.m. Eastern. And if you aren't able to join, you can still drop your question. I send out the replays a few days later, so you're able to still have your question answered live. I do not currently provide live coaching. This is the reason I created this program, is because I get so many people reaching out to me about podcast coaching, and I just can't, do one-on-one with everyone at this stage. So this is the way that I can have a high touch experience with you guys inside of a private community. I also answer questions, in between when we actually talk live. So you, like Felicia said in her testimonial, like you truly get that hands-on experience from me. So it doesn't just have to be a one-on-one coaching call to feel that. All righty. Okie dokes. Just going through, and if I'm not answering your question specifically, is because I answered it with someone else's question. Dion says, is a podcast about Black patients and rare disease narrow enough? Which rare disease, Dion? So I would encourage you to actually zero in on the disease, like the person who wants to talk about, kidney disease. Deetra says, my podcast is a storytelling show. I'm not sure how to title that to be more specific. So storytelling, it could be so many things. What are you telling stories about? Is it like the moth type of storytelling, where it's like people getting up and you pick a word? I think that's how the moth does it, MOTH. Have you heard of that? So storytelling is broad. It could be film storytelling. It could be social media storytelling. So with anything you do, think to yourself, you can even, do this with your friend circle, right? Say, I have a show about this, and write down the questions they ask you. If they're like, what does that mean? What kind of storytelling? Who do you talk to? What do they talk about? Like, those are the questions you need to answer with your title, with your episode titles, and with your show description. So if you are finding yourself getting questions like that over and over again, then you have more refining work to do. Deetra also says, what do you think about sharing your podcast on YouTube? I think that sharing your podcast on YouTube is a great idea. I did not take advantage of that as quickly as I should, but it's never too late. I've started just in 2021, and my YouTube is almost going to be monetized because I finally started regularly sharing. And this was before. This is not video, guys. Share your audio, with just the thumbnail of your podcast on YouTube, because again, it's Google, so it's a search engine, and you're getting more views and more listeners on YouTube. There's some people who solely use YouTube. All right. Aaliyah says, how long does the Libsyn code last? A month. You get the first month and a half free on Libsyn, and you can use it anytime. So you don't have to, it doesn't expire if that's what you're asking. So I'm a continued affiliate with Libsyn. Alrighty. So with that, you guys, we are going to wrap up. Shout out again to the replay viewers. You are going to hear from me. And I know some of you guys are like, why is she emailing me so much? Because people forget. So you are going to hear from me for, a few more days. So if you missed this or missed any part of this, I will send out the replay. You'll get to see the slides again, via the replay. And if you have any further questions, okay, here's the code again. It's Hustle Pro, and the website is libsyn.com. And let me stop the share because this might be easier for me to share everything with you before I go, you guys. So again, we are used to using, Joanna and I usually use, what's it called, Joanna? We used to use Webinar Jam, but Webinar Jam, started being faulty. So we're getting used to this Zoom interface. All right. So this is the link to join, sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. And then the link to get the first month and a half free of hosting is on Libsyn.com. Yes, thank you bunches for being here, you guys. And with that, I'm going to end the webinar, you guys. So have a great rest of your night. Thank you again for joining me on this Thursday evening, and I will talk to you via email tomorrow. Good night.